Well, hello everyone. This is Daniel here at the SOLA Network, and here I am with Billy Lowe. And I'm going to have you introduce yourself, Billy. Tell us what you do and tell us why we're having this conversation.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Billy, and I live in Sweden, Nordic countries, and I have lived here for almost whole of my life. I came to Sweden when I was two from Hong Kong, and my parents, you can say they are the first generation, and then I'm the second, and now I have also family. So now it's the third generation here in Sweden.
So you have
And
kids.
you, yeah, I have kids. I have three kids, and the oldest one is actually adult now. Is 18, and then the
Wow.
second is a daughter, 17, and then I have the youngest one, a son, 14.
And they're all born in Sweden.
Yes, they are the third generation. So I'm not sure if they are going to, if they are able to speak Chinese or understand Chinese.
Okay. Why don't you tell us about your ministry in Sweden?
Oh yeah, I belongs to a Nordic Chinese church in Stockholm. So I started to go to church in this church and then become a Christian. And then I went to a Bible seminar and then become a pastor. So I've been pastor in this church for 20 years now, 20 years.
Your church is actually in different locations, in different locations. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, my church is belongs to a Nordic Chinese church, and we have six different sites or churches. So two in Norway, three in Sweden, and one in Finland. So we belongs to the same family, but we in the same time we are independent from each other, but we have a lot of cooperation.
Okay, so it's like a church network that you share together.
Yeah, and this network, this family, church family, we have been together for almost 30 years now.
Wow. Okay. I think some of our listeners would be curious to know how your family or other Chinese families ended up in the Nordic countries. Can you share about that? Can you share some history?
Oh yeah, I asked my father, and I think we can say during the 60 and 70, I think there is a big group of Hong Kong people went to Sweden and Norway, Nordic countries. And also, I think also Taiwanese people. So Hong Kong people and Taiwanese people, and the majority when they come to Nordic countries, they work as in the restaurant.
Mm.
And I think a smaller group of people before the occupation, they are sailor, and then they find a new home in Nordic countries, and then when they stay in the Nordic countries, usually they also work in the restaurant business.
So that was that your family, the restaurant business?
Yeah, I think 97, 98, 99% third generation, they work in the restaurant business.
Okay. Uh, but there's the second and third generation now. Are they starting
Yeah.
to do other things?
Oh, yeah, I think at least for me, because that the experience of the restaurant business is so difficult. So I think that not that many second generation people would like to have the same business, do the same business, same occupation, like the parents. So I think that the generation people, they will like to do other things. They will like to do find other occupation.
Mm.
So most of them they do other things than the parents.
Mm. Um, hey, can you describe so how are the experiences of Chinese people in the Nordic countries? I mean, it seems like they're a minority. You're a minority. So how do you how what's the experience like?
Uh, I think that before when I raised up in Sweden, I think compared to many other immigrants group, I think Chinese people, Hong Kong people, we are a group of people that we are quite have been welcomed to Sweden. We have a quite good reputation because that Chinese people, one of the sign of Chinese people is hardworking.
Mm, mm,
So Hong Kong people, Chinese people, we don't like to have trouble. There's only one thing we like is earning money, making doing business. So I think at least in the beginning, Chinese people is quite welcome in Sweden. And nowadays, I think it's not that big change, in my opinion. But because of the situation with China, is become more sensitive. So
mhm.
maybe a little bit more sensitive than before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and do you see that there's a different experience for those who are born and raised there, kind of like your kids and you and your kids?
Oh, I think that I think it's quite the same. I don't know. I guess it's like the same. I think the most sensitive time is the teenage
Mm,
because during the teenage they just want to have the friends that they will look the same, think the same. So to look like Asian people among Swedish people is not that popular. But I
mm,
think that is something that they will change when they get older.
mm. So as they learn about their own Chinese culture while living in the Nordic countries.
Yeah, and in the same time, I think that at least the capital city in the Nordic countries become more diverse,
Mm, mm,
international. So it's quite often when I go out and in the metro station, I can hear different kind of language.
mm.
So I think that the time have changed. It become more international, diverse. So I think that if you are Swedish people or Swedish or Chinese, I think it's still important, but I think the time that is diverse, so it's normal that maybe you are not the same like everyone
Right,
because
right.
that there's different kind of people now.
Yeah, you mentioned those capital cities. Is that
Yeah,
where the Nordic Chinese Church Network churches are?
yeah, some of them, and then and also other bigger city in the Nordic countries.
Can you name them? What are some places?
Or in Sweden is Stockholm
Stockholm?
and Gothenburg, yeah, and Malmö. In these three is the biggest city in Sweden.
Hmm.
And then in Norway we have Oslo, and then we have Stavanger. So in these two cities we have our Chinese church,
Hmm.
and then in Finland we have in Helsinki,
Helsinki. Okay.
yeah, and then we also have a mission field now in Denmark, Copenhagen. So we
Copenhagen.
have a missionary there and trying to reach out and build a church.
Right, because there's folks there as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also Nordic countries is also so close to Sweden to other Nordic countries. So we feel that God is guiding us that we need to start a mission field in Denmark.
Pastor Billy, you and I are having a conversation in English. Can
Yes.
you tell me about the languages at your church?
Oh, well, yeah. We use Chinese, and Chinese means that the Mandarin,
Mhm.
and then Cantonese, and then also we have a local ministry, which means is Swedish. So we use Swedish in our local ministry.
When you get together with the other churches in your network, what about that? What do you do in those cases?
Oh, there will be an English training camp. We will start to speak English because that I think that you can say that half of the group speak Mandarin original, and then the other half speak Cantonese. But because that we are the next gen, so our Chinese is quite bad. So the common language between Finland, Norway, Sweden, and maybe Denmark also, it would be English. So English become the the joint language we have together. Every time when we have a joint service, when we have things together, we will use English.
So when you get together, especially you said next generation,
Mhm.
they you actually meet and conduct everything in English.
Yeah, and that is something. It's a benefit us because that then we become more international.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Can you tell me about kind of the some of the spiritual needs of the Chinese and then the Nordic Chinese?
Well, I think two things. One thing is about family,
Hmm.
because that I just have the feeling I haven't studied before about it, but I just have the feeling about among all the immigrant churches. I think Chinese church, one thing that we have quite good is uh, how do you say, the economy. I think most of the Chinese people, they taking care of themselves, they do business. So about the financial is not a very, very big issue. But I think the problem is that family issue, family problem. So I know more and more families that even that they are high educated or
Hmm.
low educated, it's the same problem that marriage problem
Hmm.
or parenting problems. And that is one thing that we need to help the families. One thing that we need to have a prayer request that we need to pray for the families.
Yeah, you mentioned there were two things. So that's the first thing is the family.
Yeah, and the second thing is that maybe this is also a Chinese culture, and that is more focused on the co-worker, the Christian. And I have the feeling that we have some quite many co-workers that they are really faithful and hardworking, but in the same time that it's almost become that your relationship with God become the serving.
Mm.
You serve and serve and serve, and maybe it's quite typical for Chinese people that you need to work. You need to, it's hardworking. You work for God. You work for the church. But I think in the long term, it will become that you will be exhausted, burn out, and then maybe that when you are not serving, what is your relationship with God? That is the question.
Mm. So
Yeah,
being able to relate to God outside of working or serving.
yeah. I think that is something that we need to develop more because otherwise, I think that there's always a big need in the church. But how about your relationship with God? I think that is a big spiritual need.
Mm. Okay. So how are the churches kind of reaching uh, Chinese, Nordic Chinese, and making disciples?
Um, I think maybe we can, especially for the next generation. Before when I was young,
Hmm.
in that period, I think it's much easier. I have to say because on that time when the church organized camps or similar activities, there's always a bunch of new people coming, Chinese people. But nowadays it's so different. It's much more difficult because that I think mainly about the internet, social media, so people is not attracted to to come to the church longer, uh, especially the young people. So I think that if you think about young people, next gen people, nowadays, I think that one of the key is that you really need to have a good relationship with the parents.
Mm.
Without the parents involved and help, it seems like that you cannot uh, the young people just stay in the bedroom because the bedroom is the paradise. The bedroom, they have the computer. The bedroom, they have all the things. And you, if you want to come, they go out from the paradise. It's so difficult for them. So I think that uh, have the good relationship with the parents is one of the key that we need to reach out to the young people.
Mm. Reaching out to the whole family.
Yeah. That's true.
Pastor Billy, you mentioned that we can pray for the families in the Nordic Chinese. What are some
Yes.
other ways we can pray for the Nordic Chinese?
I think that the other thing is about the relationship in the church between the third generation leadership and the next generation leadership, because that we have exist for uh, 40 plus years, which means that by God's grace, we have some new leader from the next generation. But I think one important key is that the leadership between these two generations, that they can working together, appreciate what they are doing. So one prayer request is that we have a good relationship, cooperation with the different generation.
Hmm. Okay.
And then the family issue I have already mentioned. And I think the third, I would say the mental health.
Mental
I
health.
think yeah, mental health, because that I think is worldwide about the mental wealth. But for me or for us living in Nordic countries, I think that when I'm getting older, for example, I will be affected of the season.
Mm.
So it's especially during the winter, I realize more and more that the people who are not feeling good,
Hmm.
it will be even harder for them during the winter, because that is cold, because it's dark,
Dark.
you
Yeah.
don't want to go out, you don't want to meet people. So it will be even harder. So I think it's not only the Chinese people, it's actually for all the people in at least in Sweden, that the mental health is a big issue that the whole society need to face, but also the church, what the church can do to help the people who have a mental health issue.
Mm. Well, Pastor Billy, thank you very much for your time. It's been really good for us to hear about uh, the Nordic Chinese and how you're ministering to them and get a glimpse into their needs and how we can pray for them. So, Pastor Billy Lowe, everyone from Nordic Chinese Christian Church in Stockholm, Sweden.